Once upon a time, in a distant kingdom beyond the majestic mountains and across the Great Divide, lived a beautiful young woman named Faye. She was married to a man named Obayana, who cherished her deeply. Faye and Obayana came from two distinct villages, but fate brought them together during the annual festival of the 7 villages that formed the kingdom of Barty. During this festival, Obayana was captivated by Faye's grace as she danced to the enchanting rhythm of the drums. Smitten by her beauty, he decided to make her his wife. The love that Obayana felt for Faye was sincere and unconditional. However, a dark cloud soon cast a shadow over their happiness. Obayana's brother Barmani also harbored deep feelings for Faye and aspired to marry her. Having spotted Faye at the festival at the same time as his brother, Barmani was driven by a burning passion. But Obayana, the elder and more audacious of the two, took the initiative and declared his love for Faye first. Already married to Obayana, Faye unfortunately became the victim of Barmani's incessant harassment. She did not want to be the cause of division between the two brothers, so she tried her best to ignore and avoid Barmani's advances. However, jealousy grew within Barmani, pushing him to devise a vengeful plan against Faye for rejecting him. Barmani was a respected and loved man among the villagers, and he knew that whatever he said, the villagers would support him. However, Faye came from another village. One day, Barmani made allegations against Faye, claiming that she had harassed him and repeatedly asked him to sleep with her despite his refusals. Out of love for his brother, he said, Faye persisted. He claimed he was at his wits' end and asked for her to be reasoned with. Such accusations were very serious, and this type of relationship was taboo in the village. The villagers, stunned and believing Barmani's lies, decided to bury Femi alive to save the village from the curse. Femi, dragged like a rag, was taken to the village square. She was pelted with stones and humiliated for all to see before being led to the village cemetery, where her grave was already dug. She pleaded and professed her innocence, but no one listened. Instead, they threw stones at her and spat into her grave. Obayana deeply loved and trusted his wife, and he couldn't conceive that his beloved would betray him with his own brother. Despite cherishing his wife, he was faced with a dilemma: his wife's word against his brother's. His life became unbearable and he cursed her. Nevertheless, out of love for his wife, he pleaded with the villagers to show clemency in their sentence. The villagers threw Femi into a pit while she desperately called out her husband's name and begged Obayana to help her. The villagers began to cover Femi with sand. Obayana collapsed, powerless, watching his wife being buried under the earth. It was a heart-wrenching sight for Obayana, who cried out in pain, unable to intervene. As they covered the grave, Femi cried bitterly and cursed the kingdom. She declared that none of their daughters would marry or bear children. She cursed them, saying, "As long as I am innocent, you will never know peace, and your generation will suffer forever. Barmani, you are vile and powerless. You will never be happy. Your mind will always be troubled, and you will be buried alive by strangers." Barmani was filled with guilt, but it was too late, and he was ashamed to admit his lies. He retreated to his hut and wept bitterly, blaming and cursing his actions. After Femi was buried alive, life in the village continued, but strange things began to happen. The curse started to take effect, and the marriages of the village girls, which were supposed to take place, began to be cancelled without reason. Obayana mourned his beloved wife for years, unaware that his brother was the architect of his innocent wife's death. Barmani, filled with guilt, always comforted Obayana, advising him to remarry. He also considered confessing his crime to his brother, but he feared how his brother would react. After a long period of mourning, Obayana remarried a woman from a distant small village. Together they had a daughter named Dalili. Despite having a loving family, Obayana could not stop thinking about his deceased wife, as she always appeared to him in dreams, asking him to take care of himself and his new family. Femi's spirit never revealed the identity of her killer, leaving Obayana in ignorance. Obayana promised to make his family. He decided to confess to his friend Akin, who was shocked by the confession but remained calm. Akin promised to help his friend redeem himself. He suggested that Barmani confess to the village chief to appease Femi's tormented soul through appropriate rituals. Barmani followed Akin's advice and confessed his atrocities to the village chief. The chief, incredulous, consulted his advisors. Upon hearing of Barmani's heinous deeds, they demanded his immediate execution. The news spread like wildfire through the village, causing shock among the inhabitants. Obayana was immediately summoned to the palace and ran there. He could not believe that his own brother had caused him so much pain. He cursed Barmani and begged the village chief to banish Barmani instead of killing him. He pleaded with a heavy heart. They gathered at the main palace, regretting their role in Femi's death. They decided to listen to Obayana, the one most affected, and banish Barmani. The palace men came and dragged Barmani out of the village after stoning and beating him mercilessly. They told him to leave the village or they would kill him. He ran as fast as he could and found himself in another village. People avoided him like the plague for no apparent reason, as if it were written on his body that he had committed an abomination. No one knew him in this village, but they still avoided him. He wandered through the village, begging for food and eventually finding himself homeless and jobless. He began eating from trash bins. Although he was not insane, people thought he was. He cried day and night, begging Femi to forgive him. One night, as he slept, he felt someone shaking him vigorously. He opened his eyes and saw Femi standing before him. He got up in shock. She looked so sad and tired. Barmani knelt and began begging for her forgiveness. Femi told him she would forgive him on one condition. Barmani rushed to ask what it was. She told him he must go to her grave, take some sand from it, climb to the top of the highest mountain in the kingdom, and throw the sand into the air. Barmani told her he had been banished from the village and would be killed if he was seen near it. Femi told him this was the only way she could forgive him, and then she disappeared. Barmani's heart was troubled as he did not know how to proceed. He devised a plan to sneak into the village at midnight so no one would see him. He disguised himself, covering his face and wearing dirty clothes. He finally managed to enter the village with fear in his heart. But fortunately, no one noticed him because he looked too old and dirty, easily mistaken for a madman. He went straight to Femi's grave, took some sand, and began returning to the other village. He ran as fast as he could, finally leaving the village before anyone woke up. He was relieved to finally be on the path to freedom. He tried to find out where the mountain was and asked a few people who told him that the mountain village was to the north of the kingdom, requiring 7 days of walking to reach it. He began his journey. As he was about to reach the 7th day, something happened. Tired from the long walk, he decided to rest under a tree. He climbed the tree, and as he was about to close his eyes, he heard cries and saw people chasing a man. Intrigued, he wondered what was happening. The pursuers tracked the man, but he managed to escape. They began searching everywhere. Suddenly, a little boy looked up and saw Barmani. He pointed his finger at him and shouted. At that moment, Barmani's heart skipped a beat and started racing. People gathered near the tree and ordered him to come down. Too scared, they began throwing stones at him. He climbed down the tree. They caught him. He tried to explain, but no one listened. They took him and kept him in a cage for 3 days. They brought him out and took him to a cemetery where they performed rituals. Barmani pleaded and cried, not understanding why he was in this situation, but no one listened. They seized him and threw him into a grave, starting to cover him with sand. He heard them say, "We could not forgive him. He poisoned our king." Barmani screamed and cried, but in vain. His voice eventually faded, and the villagers left, never knowing that he was not the person who had poisoned their king. Several years later, Dalili, Obayana's daughter, had grown into a beautiful woman. However, she stood out from the other village girls with her sharp mind. One day, Dalili met a young man named Kafee, who was handsome and charming. He seemed to be the ideal partner for Dalili. However, he was the son of the village chief. Kafee, unaware of Dalili's family's past, fell in love with her. When he discovered her connection to Barmani, he was devastated. He knew he couldn't marry her due to his uncle's past actions, but he also didn't want to break Dalili's heart. One night, Kafee had a dream. He saw Femi's ghost telling him not to fear marrying Dalili. Femi declared she had forgiven the villagers for what they did to her and wanted Dalili to be happy. The next day, Kafee told Dalili about his dream. Surprised but hopeful, Kafee believed that their union would change things in the village. The two families met, and the village chief discovered Dalili's identity and her close relation to Barmani. He began to reconsider the situation. He called his son to inform him of the consequences. Kafee recounted his dream to his father. Shocked, his father decided to let the marriage proceed. Dalili and Kafee married, breaking the curse in the village. The villagers learned their lesson and continued to appease Femi's spirit. Dalili and Kafee lived happily ever after. Femi's tragic story reveals a cruel truth about the blind credulity and cruelty of a community manipulated by false accusations. The lessons from this story are: be honest and loyal to your loved ones. Barmani betrayed his brother and lied about Femi, causing great pain and suffering to all involved. If he had been honest and loyal, he would have respected his brother's marriage and avoided the curse. Do not judge people without knowing the whole truth. The villagers believed Barmani's lies, condemning Femi without giving her a chance to defend herself. They acted based on their prejudices and superstitions, ignoring the signs that Barmani was lying and that Femi was innocent. If they had been more open-minded and just, they would have listened to Femi and avoided the curse. Thank you for following the story to the end. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, comment, like, and share with your loved ones. Let me know which country you're following us from. Be blessed, and see you next time.